This is the Galaxy S24 Ultra, the best phone Samsung has ever made, but it's $1,300. And this is the Galaxy S21 Ultra, and when this phone was made, it was also the best phone Samsung has ever made, but now it's only $300. So what's the $1,000 difference between these phones if they're both so good? And if you're a Samsung hater, I got something for you. The 128GB S21 Ultra, right now you can find for around $325 on eBay in excellent condition. The S24 Ultra only comes in 256 and it's $1,300, which is nearly $1,000 more expensive. I will say out of the gates, there's something pretty shocking about the S21 Ultra because Samsung did promise us 7 years of updates for this crop of flagship phones, but back then Samsung was pretty tight-lipped about updates. The S21 is completely up to date with One UI 6.0 and Android 14. From the front, this phone reminds me of a OnePlus with its curved OLED display. The edges are also beveled, and overall it does feel comfortable in the hand, but also can be a little slippery at times too. On the right side, you have the volume rocker and also well, this was a Bixby button, which was a whole thing, and I don't want to get into that. The point is the S21 Ultra in the hand feels like a modern day flagship phone. Some of you guys have complained about the S24 Ultra's design this year. The S24 Ultra is just a big old square. I mean, really, look at this thing. On the front, Samsung revealed his anti-glare OLED display, and I think it looks great. The volume rocker, the power button, it clicks a whole lot better too. You know, when comparing the clicking between the S21 and this phone, S21 kind of feels mushy. Overall, it may not be as comfortable for some people, but I truly think it is, and this design is absolutely gorgeous. On the back, we do have our camera clusters, which houses the 3 main lenses. Now, the lenses on the S21 Ultra, it doesn't protrude out like we're seeing on a lot of phones now, but it has this little housing that really protects it from protruding out. Even though these lenses are still big, this housing makes it look not as big. Comparing this to the S24 Ultra, which has these lenses that really stick out with these metal rings around it, really reminds me of like a stovetop design, like you're about to make a nice omelet on these bad boys. As far as build, there's not a phone that feels better than the S24 Ultra in my hands, and I mean compared to any other phone. Now, when you start comparing speed on these, that is another one that surprised me. I will say when going back and forth, you can see the S24 Ultra just feels a bit more smooth. As expected, once you stop looking for smoothness, then they start to feel the same. You know, launching apps, the S24 Ultra is a touch faster overall, and the S24 Ultra is faster regardless of any phone you compare it to. But when just using the phone day to day, I found myself using the S21 Ultra and not thinking one time that it's slow. So I did try running games on both these devices, and there were some pretty intense games. And I'll say both phones ran them very similar, but I did notice the S24 Ultra did load games faster when launching. But once we were actually in the game, they started to feel the same. I did find touch response on the S24 Ultra to be a bit more zippier as well. But honestly, performance on the S21 Ultra is a testament on how well this phone is holding up, hardware and software wise. Now there is one spec that S21 Ultra has that it was kind of ahead of its time, but it's kind of one that's hard to discuss because it's battery, and a battery that's a couple years old is not going to last as long as a brand new battery, but this is a 5,000 milliamp battery. And so I can't do a direct comparison about it, but let me tell you how it's been after so many years. I find around about 6 p.m. is when this phone gets to about 20% of battery, where the S24 Ultra is at around 60%. And I really think that's because of the age of the battery. But let's talk speakers. The S24 Ultra has some booming speakers, and I can tell that Samsung invested some resources into this one, as the S21 sounds a bit muffled and tinny in comparison. Also, charging speeds, S21 Ultra charged at a max speed at 25 watts, which is 0 to 50% in 30 minutes, where the S24 Ultra uses 45 watt charging, which in that same 30 minutes, you get around 70% of battery life. But even back then, the charging brick did not come in the box. As promised, we're gonna pan the camera from battery and move them up to cameras. And this one is going to be very interesting. Now, the main spec on these cameras are going to be the sensor. This is 108 megapixel and this is 200 megapixels. Now we're not capturing images at this large a scale, but the information gathering is nearly double. Also, the pixel size is bigger on the S24 Ultra, and that should give us a better advantage in low light. Now, one thing that pops out to me is the sharpness on the S24 Ultra, but maybe it looks a little over sharp. And I kind of go back and forth here because sometimes sharpness does look really good and it looks like a high quality shot, but other times maybe the sharpness kind of makes it feel a little bit more digital. But regardless, the S24 does provide better images with better color and also more detail. When the light starts to dip down a bit, you can see the S24 Ultra really kicks into high gear compared to the S21 Ultra. You know, looking at these images side by side without even telling you which phone is which, I'm sure you know which one is which. On the S21, you have a 3x zoom at 10 megapixels. On the S24, you have a 5x zoom at 50 megapixels. Whereas the S21 Ultra is stuck at this 3x zoom, and you can digitally zoom in, but at 10 megapixels, it falls apart pretty quickly. The S21 Ultra introduced Space Zoom, which is a 100x zoom. Let's see over the years if it's gotten any better compared to the S24 Ultra. And yeah, the S24 Ultra does look better, and there's a number of reasons why. Number one, you have double the megapixel count. Number two, newer sensor, and number three, AI is actually helping to smooth the edges. All right, guys, here it is, Galaxy S21 Ultra right here. Let me know how it looks and how does it sound compared to the S24 Ultra, which is on this side right here. And I was pretty surprised with S21 Ultra's video. It still is pretty good, but once again, low light starts to destroy the image pretty fast. The S24 Ultra has an S Pen that goes inside the phone, whereas the S21 Ultra, you actually had to buy an S Pen and there was nowhere to store it. So yeah, when you compare the S21 to the S24, you can see the difference. But if I was posting these images to social media or just texting people these images, I don't think anyone would really notice. If you're on a budget, I don't see why you wouldn't go the route if you find a good condition S21 Ultra, but you need to understand the battery is not going to be what it was before. Samsung haters will tell you that these phones never get better and that Samsung phones are always the same. I think what they mean to say is that Samsung phones hold up well over time. And for $350, the S21 Ultra still holds its own in comparison to the $1,300 S24 Ultra. With that being said, there are other phones that came out this year that are cheaper and just as new and have amazing specs, giving the S24 Ultra a run for its money. Watch my comparison of the S24 Ultra compared to the OnePlus 12. If you want to see those two phones duke it out,